The dust rose from the wagon wheels as they crossed into Willits, California, and Adelaide Grace felt every eye in town turn toward her despite the veil she wore to shield her face from the September sun. 15 years had passed since she had last walked these streets. 15 years since the Pomo tribe had found her wandering half-dead in the wilderness after the attack that had stolen her family. And now she was returning to the only town she had ever called home before her life had changed forever. The year was 1878, and the world she remembered had transformed just as much as she had. But the hostile stares from the townspeople suggested that their memories were long and their forgiveness short. She climbed down from the wagon that had brought her from the settlement, her doeskin dress drawing whispers and pointed fingers from the women gathered outside the general store. Adelaide pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, suddenly aware of how different she looked, how much she had become someone else during those years with the Pomo people who had saved her life and raised her as their own. The beadwork on her clothing, the way she wore her dark hair in braids wrapped with leather cord, the patterns she had painted on her moccasins, all of it marked her as someone who did not belong in this world anymore, though she had been born into it. The wagon driver took her payment and left without a word, leaving Adelaide standing alone in the middle of Main Street with nothing but a leather pack containing her few possessions. She had come back because the tribal elders had encouraged her to seek her own path now that she was 23 years old, a woman who had been raised in two worlds and might need to find where she truly belonged. Her adoptive mother among the Pomo, a woman named Singing Bird, had pressed a small pouch of silver coins into her hand and told her that sometimes the past held answers that could only be found by facing it directly. The saloon doors swung open and 3 men stumbled out, their laughter dying when they caught sight of her. One of them, a heavy-set man with a thick beard, spat into the dirt near her feet. Adelaide did not flinch, though her heart hammered in her chest. She had survived too much to be intimidated by crude gestures, but the hatred in his eyes reminded her that this town had never been kind to those who were different. "Well, would you look at that?" the bearded man said, his voice carrying across the street. "We got ourselves a squaw standing in the middle of town like she owns the place." Adelaide lifted her chin and met his gaze steadily. "I am Adelaide Grace. My father owned the lumber mill on the north edge of town before he died. I have come back to see what became of his property." The man's eyes narrowed. "Adelaide Grace died with her family 15 years ago. Everyone knows that. You are just some Indian pretending to be a white woman to get your hands on land that does not belong to you." Before Adelaide could respond, a voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "That is enough, Harlan. The lady said who she is, and unless you have proof otherwise, you will treat her with respect." Adelaide turned to see a tall man stepping off the wooden walkway in front of the livery stable. He wore worn denim pants and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned forearms marked with old scars. His dark hair was longer than most men wore it in town, curling slightly at the collar, and his eyes were a striking gray-green that seemed to take in everything at once. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with the lean build of someone who worked hard for a living and the confident walk of a man who knew how to handle himself. "This is none of your business, Riley," Harlan said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "I am making it my business," the man named Riley said calmly. He stopped a few feet from Adelaide and touched the brim of his worn hat in a gesture of respect. "Riley Edwards, madam. I work at the livery and do some ranching on the side. If you are looking for information about your father's property, I might be able to help. I have lived here all my life." Adelaide studied his face, searching for any hint of mockery or deception, but found only genuine courtesy. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I would appreciate any help you could offer." Riley nodded and gestured toward the livery stable. "Why do not we get out of the sun? You look like you have traveled a long way, and I imagine you could use some water and a place to sit for a spell." Harlan made a disgusted sound and turned away, his companions following. Adelaide watched them go before accepting Riley's offered assistance with her pack. She walked beside him toward the livery, acutely aware of the curious and hostile stares following their progress down the street. The interior of the livery stable was cooler and smelled of hay, horses, and leather. Riley set her pack down on a bench near the door and pulled out a wooden stool for her, before fetching a dipper of water from a barrel in the corner. Adelaide drank gratefully, not realizing how thirsty she had been until the cool water touched her lips. "Thank you," she said again, handing the dipper back to him. "You did not have to intervene out there." Riley shrugged as he hung the dipper back on its hook. Harlan is a bully who likes to pick on people he thinks cannot fight back. He needed reminding that decent folks do not behave that way. He pulled up a hay bale and sat down facing her, keeping a respectful distance. "So you really are Adelaide Grace, the little girl who survived the mountain lion attack." Adelaide felt her throat tighten at the memory. "It was not a mountain lion. It was 3 men who broke into our cabin looking for gold they thought my father had hidden. They killed my parents and my younger brother. I ran into the woods and they chased me. I thought I would die out there, but the Pomo found me instead. They took me in and raised me as one of their own." Riley's expression grew somber. "I was just a boy when that happened, maybe 10 years old. The whole town searched for you for weeks. Eventually, everyone assumed you had died from exposure or been taken by animals. Your father's property was seized by the bank when no heirs came forward to claim it." "Who owns it now?" Adelaide asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer would not be a pleasant one. "A man named Vernon Blackthorne bought it from the bank about 5 years ago. He runs cattle on the land now, though the mill building is still standing, just falling apart from neglect." Riley paused, then added carefully, "I should tell you, Blackthorne is not a good man. He has a reputation for being ruthless in his business dealings, and he does not take kindly to anyone challenging his ownership of anything." Adelaide nodded slowly. "I expected something like that. I do not suppose there is any legal way to reclaim the property." Riley was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "You might have a case if you can prove who you are. There were records of your birth, and maybe someone in town would remember enough details to verify your identity. But getting a lawyer to take on your case against Blackthorne would be difficult. He has most of the influential people in this town in his pocket one way or another." "What about you?" Adelaide asked. "Why are you helping me? You do not even know me." Riley met her eyes directly. "My father taught me that you judge a person by their character, not by how they dress or who raised them. You came back here knowing you would not be welcomed, which takes courage. And besides, if you really are Adelaide Grace, then what happened to you and your family was one of the worst tragedies this town has ever seen. You deserve better than to be run out of town by ignorant fools like Harlan." Something in Adelaide's chest loosened at his words. She had expected hostility, suspicion, and rejection, but this quiet cowboy with the kind eyes was offering her something she had not dared hope for: acceptance. "I do not have much money," she said honestly, "but if you would help me find a way to reclaim my father's land, I would be grateful. I do not expect charity, though. I can work. The Pomo taught me many skills." Riley stood and offered his hand to help her up. "First things first, you need a place to stay. The boarding house is run by Mrs. Henderson, and she is a fair woman, even if she is a bit set in her ways. I can introduce you and vouch for your character. Then tomorrow we can start looking into the legal situation with your father's property." Adelaide took his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work and the gentle strength in his grip. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Edwards? Truly." Riley smiled for the first time, and Adelaide was struck by how the expression transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "Call me Riley, please. And I suppose I am doing it because it is the right thing to do, and because something tells me you have got a lot more fight in you than people realize. I have always had a soft spot for the underdog." They left the livery together, and Adelaide noticed how Riley's presence beside her changed the way people looked at her. The hostility was still there, but it was tempered now by uncertainty. Riley Edwards might just work at the livery, but clearly he commanded a certain amount of respect in town, enough that people thought twice before openly challenging someone under his protection. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was a 2-story white building with green shutters and a neat garden in front. The proprietor herself was a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She looked Adelaide up and down with obvious disapproval, but listened politely as Riley explained the situation. "I remember the Grace family," Mrs. Henderson said finally. "Terrible thing. What happened to them?" "If you are truly Adelaide Grace, then I suppose you have as much right as anyone to a room in my establishment. But I will expect payment in advance, and I will not tolerate any trouble. My other boarders are respectable people, and I will not have them disturbed." "I understand," Adelaide said quietly. "I will cause no trouble, Mrs. Henderson. I just need a place to stay while I sort out my affairs." Mrs. Henderson named her price, which was higher than Adelaide had hoped but still manageable with the coins Singing Bird had given her. She paid for a week in advance and received a key to a small room on the second floor at the back of the house. Riley helped carry her pack upstairs, and when Mrs. Henderson had retreated back to her kitchen, he paused in the doorway. "I know today has been difficult," he said. "But you handled yourself well. I will come by tomorrow morning and we can go talk to the county clerk about the property records. In the meantime, try to rest. You are safe here, and Mrs. Henderson may seem stern, but she is honest, and she will not let anyone bother you under her roof." Adelaide felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The journey had been long, and the emotional toll of returning to Willits was greater than she had anticipated. "Thank you, Riley, for everything. I do not know what I would have done if you had not helped me." Riley tipped his hat to her. "Get some rest, Adelaide. Things will look better in the morning. They always do." After he left, Adelaide sat on the narrow bed in her room and looked around at the simple furnishings. A washstand with a chipped basin, a small wardrobe, a chair by the window. It was so different from the dwelling she had shared with Singing Bird and her family, where everything was made to be portable and practical, where the walls were bark and hide instead of wood and plaster. She felt caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither, and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake in coming back. But then she thought of Riley Edwards, and the way he had stood up for her without hesitation, the respect in his eyes when he looked at her, the genuine kindness in his offer of help. Perhaps there was a place for her in this town after all, or perhaps she could make one, with the help of a cowboy who believed in treating people fairly regardless of how different they seemed. That night, Adelaide lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the town. Horses in the street, laughter from the saloon, the rattle of a wagon passing by. She thought of Singing Bird and the rest of the tribe, wondered if they were thinking of her too, and sent a silent prayer to the spirits that she would find what she was searching for in this place that was both familiar and foreign. The next morning, Riley arrived at the boarding house just as Adelaide was finishing a simple breakfast in the dining room. The other boarders had given her a wide berth, their conversation stopping when she entered and resuming in whispers once she had taken a seat at the far end of the table. Adelaide had eaten quickly, uncomfortable with the scrutiny, and was grateful when Riley's knock at the front door gave her an excuse to leave. "Morning," Riley greeted her, his hat in his hands. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough," Adelaide lied. In truth, she had barely slept at all, but she did not want to burden him with her troubles. "Where is this county clerk you mentioned?" "His office is in the courthouse, about 3 blocks from here." "Fair warning, though. The clerk is a man named Mortimer Finch, and he is officious and particular about rules. He is not going to make this easy." Adelaide squared her shoulders. "I did not come back expecting easy, Riley. I came back for what is rightfully mine." The determination in her voice made Riley smile. "That is the spirit. Come on, then. Let us go see what Mr. Finch has to say about your claim." The courthouse was a sturdy brick building that also housed the sheriff's office and the town's small jail. Inside, the air was stuffy and smelled of old paper and ink. A thin man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose sat behind a desk piled high with ledgers and documents. He looked up with obvious irritation when Riley and Adelaide entered. "What can I do for you?" Mortimer Finch asked, his tone suggesting he would rather they went away. "This is Adelaide Grace," Riley said. "She has come to inquire about property that belonged to her father, Thomas Grace, before his death 15 years ago." Finch's eyebrows rose sharply. "Adelaide Grace is dead. Died in 1863 along with the rest of her family." "I am not dead," Adelaide said firmly. "I survived the attack and was rescued by the Pomo tribe. I have come back to reclaim what is mine." Finch removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief, a gesture Adelaide suspected was meant to give him time to think. "That is quite a claim, young woman. Do you have any proof of your identity? Birth records, family Bible entries, anything of that nature?" "My family's Bible was in the cabin when it was attacked. I do not know what became of it, but I can tell you things about my family that only Adelaide Grace would know. My father had a scar on his left hand from a saw accident at the mill. My mother had a locket with a picture of her mother inside. My brother James had a birthmark on his shoulder shaped like a crescent moon. Our cabin had a loose floorboard by the fireplace where my father kept his important papers." Finch looked unimpressed. Anyone who knew the family might know those details. "What you need is documentary proof or witnesses who can verify your identity beyond doubt. And even if you could prove who you are, the property was legally sold to Vernon Blackthorne after the bank seized it for unpaid taxes. You would need to take the matter to court, which would be expensive and time-consuming, and there is no guarantee you would win." Riley leaned forward, his hands resting on the edge of Finch's desk. "Seems to me that if Adelaide can prove who she is, then the original seizure was improper, since the rightful heir was still alive. The bank and Blackthorne might have purchased the land in good faith, but that does not erase her legal claim. Are you a lawyer now, Mr. Edwards?" Finch asked acidly. "No, but I know right from wrong, and I know this town failed Adelaide Grace when she needed help most. The least we can do now is give her a fair chance to reclaim what is hers." Finch sighed and replaced his spectacles. "Very well. I will pull the records related to the Grace property and the sale to Mr. Blackthorne. But I am telling you now, this is going to be complicated. If you want to pursue this, Miss Grace, you are going to need legal representation. There is a lawyer here in town, Daniel Coburn, who might take your case, though whether he will go up against Blackthorne is another matter entirely." Adelaide felt a flicker of hope. It was not much, but it was something. "Where can I find Mr. Coburn?" "His office is above the bank, 2 streets over, but I would not get your hopes up. Blackthorn has a lot of influence in this town, and lawyers tend to be practical about which cases they take on." Riley and Adelaide left the courthouse together, walking slowly in the morning sunshine. Adelaide could feel the weight of curious stares from people passing by, but with Riley beside her, she felt less exposed, less vulnerable. "Do you think this lawyer will help me?" Adelaide asked. Riley was quiet for a moment. "Daniel Coburn is a decent man as lawyers go. He has principles, which is more than can be said for some. But Finch is right that Blackthorn is powerful. Taking him on would be risky for Coburn's practice." He glanced at her. "Are you sure you want to do this, Adelaide? It might be easier to just let the property go and start fresh somewhere else." Adelaide stopped walking and turned to face him. "That land is all I have left of my family. My father worked himself to exhaustion building that mill, and my mother made that cabin a home. They died defending it, and I will not let their memory be erased just because some wealthy rancher decided he wanted their land. I know it will be difficult, but I have to try. Do you understand?" Riley held her gaze, and Adelaide saw respect and something else in his eyes, something warmer that made her heart beat faster. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I will help you however I can. Let us go talk to Daniel Coburn and see what he says." The lawyer's office was neat and organized, with law books lining the shelves and a large desk covered with papers arranged in precise stacks. Daniel Coburn was a man in his 40s with graying temples and a thoughtful expression. He listened without interrupting as Adelaide told her story, occasionally making notes on a piece of paper. When she finished, Coburn sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "This is an unusual case, Miss Grace. If you can prove your identity, you would indeed have a strong legal claim to the property. However, as I am sure you have been told, Vernon Blackthorn will not relinquish the land without a fight. He has the resources to drag this out in court for months or even years, and frankly, he has connections that might make it difficult to get a fair hearing." "So you will not take my case?" Adelaide asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "I did not say that," Coburn replied. "I said it would be difficult. But I have been practicing law for 20 years, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is that justice should not depend on how much money or influence a person has. If you want to pursue this, Miss Grace, I will represent you. My fee will be reasonable, and we can discuss payment arrangements. But you need to understand what you are getting into. Blackthorn is not going to make this easy, and there will be people in town who will make your life difficult because you are challenging him." Adelaide felt Riley's hand touch her shoulder, a gentle gesture of support. "I understand, Mr. Coburn, and I am willing to fight for what is mine." Coburn nodded. "Very well. The first thing we need to do is establish your identity beyond doubt. I will need you to provide detailed testimony about your family and your life before the attack. I will also need to find witnesses who can corroborate your story. Do you know of anyone who might remember you from when you were a child?" Adelaide thought carefully. "My father did business with many people in town. The pastor of the church might remember me, and there was a woman named Mrs. Whitmore who was friends with my mother. I do not know if she still lives here." "I will make inquiries," Coburn said. "In the meantime, try to remember as many specific details as you can about your life here. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be." Over the following weeks, Adelaide settled into an uneasy routine in Willits. She spent her mornings with Daniel Coburn, recounting memories of her childhood and providing details that he meticulously documented. Riley became a constant presence in her life, escorting her through town to prevent harassment and introducing her to people who might be willing to testify on her behalf. It was during one of these walks that Adelaide began to see Riley Edwards not just as a helpful ally, but as something more. He had a quiet strength that reminded her of the warriors she had grown up with, but there was also a gentleness in him that touched her heart. He never pushed her to talk about the painful memories, but was always ready to listen when she needed to share. He made her laugh with stories about the horses he cared for at the livery and the eccentric townsfolk he dealt with daily. One afternoon, Riley took Adelaide to see her father's old property. They rode out on 2 horses from the livery, Adelaide sitting astride in her doeskin dress in a way that would have scandalized the proper ladies of Willits. But Riley did not seem to mind, and Adelaide relished the freedom of riding through the California hills with the wind in her face. The mill stood silent and weathered by years of neglect, its water wheel still and covered in moss. The cabin where Adelaide had been born was nothing but a charred foundation overgrown with weeds. Standing there, looking at the ruins of her past, Adelaide felt tears streaming down her face for the first time since she had returned. Riley dismounted and came to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I should have warned you what to expect." "No," Adelaide said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I needed to see this. I needed to say goodbye properly." She took a shaky breath. "I was 8 years old when they died. I can barely remember what they looked like now. The Pomo gave me a new life, a new family, and I am grateful for that. But standing here, I remember how much I lost." Riley reached out and gently took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her beyond offering his arm to escort her, and Adelaide felt a jolt of warmth at the contact. "You have survived so much, Adelaide. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." She turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw in his eyes something that made her breath catch. "Why are you really doing all this, Riley? You could have walked away after that first day." "You did not owe me anything." Riley's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "At first, I helped you because it was the right thing to do. But now I help you because somewhere along the way I started caring about you. More than I probably should, given that we have only known each other a few weeks." Adelaide's heart hammered in her chest. "I care about you too," she admitted. "I did not expect to find anyone in this town who would see me as a person instead of just an Indian or a curiosity. But you have been kind and patient and good, and I do not know what I would have done without you." Riley lifted his free hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Can I kiss you, Adelaide?" Instead of answering with words, Adelaide rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. But then Riley's arms came around her waist and pulled her closer, and Adelaide wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him with all the longing and hope and fear she had been carrying inside her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Riley rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the day I met you," he confessed. Adelaide laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to surprise them both. "Then why did you wait so long?" "Because I did not want you to think I was helping you just to court you. I wanted you to know that my support was genuine, regardless of anything else." "I know that," Adelaide said, touching his face with her fingertips. "You have shown me in 100 ways that you are a good man, Riley Edwards. And I think I might be falling in love with you." Riley kissed her again, softer this time. "I know I am falling in love with you, Adelaide Grace, and when this is all over, when you have your land back and everything is settled, I want to court you properly, if you will have me." "I will," Adelaide whispered. "I definitely will." They stayed at the property for another hour, walking through the overgrown fields and exploring the mill building. Riley pointed out repairs that would need to be made and talked about the potential the property still had. Adelaide listened and began to see not just the ruins of her past, but the possibility of a future, one that might include both her history and the new life she was building. When they rode back to town, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Adelaide felt lighter than she had in weeks, as if Riley's declaration of love had lifted some of the weight she had been carrying. But as they approached Willits, she saw a group of men gathered outside the livery, and the tension in Riley's shoulders told her something was wrong. The men turned as Riley and Adelaide dismounted. Adelaide recognized Harlan among them, and several others who had looked at her with hostility since her return. But the man at the center of the group was someone she did not know. A tall, heavy-set man in expensive clothes with cold eyes and a mouth set in a hard line. "Vernon Blackthorne," Riley said quietly, confirming Adelaide's suspicion. Blackthorne stepped forward, his gaze raking over Adelaide with obvious disdain. "So you are the woman claiming to be Adelaide Grace. I have been hearing quite a bit about you lately, and I thought it was time we had a conversation." Adelaide met his eyes without flinching. "If you have something to say to me, Mr. Blackthorne, say it. Very well. I will be direct. You are wasting your time with this legal claim. That property is mine, purchased legally and in good faith. Even if you could prove you are who you claim to be, which I doubt, you have no right to land that was properly sold after being abandoned for 15 years. I am giving you fair warning. Drop this ridiculous case, leave town, and go back to whatever tribe you have been living with. If you do not, I will make your life here very difficult." Riley moved to stand beside Adelaide, his hand resting on his hip near where he wore his pistol. "You do not get to threaten her, Blackthorne. And you do not get to drive people out of town just because they challenge your ownership of something." Blackthorne's expression turned ugly. "Stay out of this, Edwards. You are just a stable hand with delusions of importance. This does not concern you." "It concerns me because I am making it my concern," Riley said flatly. "Adelaide has every right to pursue her claim through proper legal channels. If you are so confident in your ownership, you should have nothing to worry about." "I am not worried," Blackthorne said. "I am simply trying to save everyone time and trouble. But if Miss Grace wants to drag this out, so be it. Just remember, I have resources she cannot imagine, and I always get what I want in the end." He turned and walked away, his men following. Harlan paused long enough to spit near Adelaide's feet again before joining them. Adelaide watched them go, her fists clenched at her sides. "He is scared," she said suddenly. Riley looked at her in surprise. "What makes you say that?" "Because if he was truly confident in his ownership, he would not have bothered coming here to threaten me. He knows my claim has merit, and that frightens him." Adelaide turned to Riley. "I am not backing down. Whatever he tries to do, I am seeing this through." "I know you are," Riley said, admiration clear in his voice. "And I will be right beside you the whole way." The confrontation with Blackthorne marked a turning point. Over the next few days, Adelaide noticed an increase in harassment from certain townspeople. Someone threw a rock through the window of her room at the boarding house. She found rotten vegetables left on the doorstep with notes telling her to leave town. At the general store, the proprietor suddenly refused to sell her supplies, claiming he was out of stock even though the shelves were clearly full. But there were also small acts of kindness that surprised Adelaide. Mrs. Henderson, despite her initial reservations, began leaving extra food at Adelaide's place during meals and asked if she needed anything. A young woman named Sarah, who worked at the dress shop, secretly gave Adelaide fabric scraps and thread after her employer had turned her away. And Riley remained constant, checking on her multiple times a day and making it clear to anyone who would listen that Adelaide was under his protection. Daniel Coburn worked tirelessly on the case, tracking down witnesses and documents. He found the old pastor, Reverend Morrison, who remembered baptizing Adelaide as an infant and was willing to testify. Mrs. Whitmore, now a widow living with her daughter, came forward with stories of Adelaide's mother and details about the family that corroborated Adelaide's testimony. Slowly, piece by piece, Coburn built a case that Adelaide Grace had indeed survived and returned. The hearing was set for late October, almost 2 months after Adelaide had returned to Willits. The night before, she could not sleep, pacing her small room and going over everything that might happen. Finally, unable to stand the confines any longer, she slipped out of the boarding house and walked through the quiet streets to the livery. Riley was still awake, sitting on a hay bale and mending a piece of harness by lamplight. He looked up when Adelaide entered and set his work aside immediately. "Could not sleep?" he asked gently. Adelaide shook her head. "I keep thinking about tomorrow. What if the judge rules against me? What if Blackthorne has already paid him off? What if I have come all this way for nothing?" Riley stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Adelaide rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you have already won in the ways that matter most. You came back and faced your past. You stood up for yourself against people who wanted to intimidate you. You proved that you are stronger than anyone gave you credit for, and you let me fall completely in love with you, which I consider a pretty significant victory." Adelaide laughed despite her anxiety. "You always know what to say to make me feel better." "That is because I have been practicing," Riley said. "I have a whole speech prepared for after the hearing, assuming things go well, about how I want to spend the rest of my life with you, help you rebuild your father's mill, maybe start a family of our own someday." But I did not want to say any of that until the legal stuff was settled, because I wanted you to know that my feelings are not dependent on whether you get the land back or not. Adelaide pulled back to look at him. "Say it now." "What? Say it now." "I do not want to wait for the hearing or worry about what might happen. Tell me now." Riley cupped her face in his hands, his gray-green eyes serious. "Adelaide Grace, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your determination. I love how you have survived things that would have broken most people. I love the way you sit a horse and the way you laugh when something truly amuses you. I love that you see the best in people even after they have given you reasons not to. And I want to marry you if you will have me. I know I do not have much to offer, just a job at the livery and a small parcel of land I have been saving up for. But I promise I will work every day to make you happy and to build a life we can both be proud of." Tears streamed down Adelaide's face, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Riley Edwards, and you have more to offer than you know. You have given me hope and acceptance and love when I thought I would never find those things in this town. You are everything I could want in a husband." Riley kissed her then, and Adelaide kissed him back with all the passion and promise of the future they would build together. They stayed in the livery until the sky began to lighten with dawn, talking about their dreams and plans, holding each other close and finding comfort in their shared hope. The courthouse was packed the next morning. It seemed like half the town had turned out to see the hearing, some out of genuine interest and others clearly looking for entertainment. Adelaide sat at a table with Daniel Coburn, trying to ignore the hostile stares from Blackthorne's supporters. Riley sat in the front row directly behind her, his presence a steadying force. Judge Harrington was a white-haired man with a stern face, and a reputation for fairness. He called the hearing to order and listened as Cowboy presented Adelaide's case. The lawyer was thorough and persuasive, calling witnesses who testified to Adelaide's identity and presenting documents that showed the Grace family's ownership of the property. Blackthorn's lawyer, a slick man named Pemberton, argued that even if Adelaide was who she claimed to be, the sale of the property had been legal and binding. He pointed out that Adelaide had been legally declared dead, that the bank had followed proper procedures in seizing the property for unpaid taxes, and that Blackthorn had purchased it in good faith with no reason to believe there were any living heirs. The arguments went back and forth for hours. Adelaide testified about her childhood, providing details that no one but the real Adelaide Grace could have known. Reverend Morrison spoke about baptizing her and watching her grow up in his congregation. Mrs. Whitmore cried as she told stories about Adelaide's mother and the friendship they had shared. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the courthouse windows, Judge Harrington called for a recess to consider his ruling. The wait was agonizing. Adelaide stood outside the courthouse with Riley, holding his hand tightly and trying not to let her anxiety overwhelm her. "No matter what happens, we face it together," Riley reminded her. Adelaide nodded, drawing strength from his calm confidence. "Together," she agreed. When the judge called everyone back inside, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Harrington settled into his seat and looked out over the crowded courtroom. "This has been a highly unusual case," he began, "and I have given considerable thought to the arguments on both sides. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, I am satisfied that the woman before me is indeed Adelaide Grace, the daughter of Thomas and Mary Grace, and the rightful heir to the property in question." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Adelaide felt Riley's hand squeeze hers. "However," the judge continued, "the matter of the property ownership is more complicated. The bank acted within its legal rights in seizing the property for unpaid taxes after Adelaide was declared dead. Mr. Blackthorn purchased the property in good faith, and he has invested considerable resources in maintaining and developing it over the past 5 years." Adelaide's heart sank. Was the judge going to rule against her after all? "That being said," Judge Harrington continued, "the original seizure was predicated on the assumption that there were no living heirs. That assumption was incorrect. Therefore, I am ruling that the sale to Mr. Blackthorn, while conducted in good faith, was nonetheless improper. The property rightfully belongs to Adelaide Grace." The courtroom erupted in noise. Some people cheered, others shouted in protest. Blackthorn stood up, his face red with anger. "This is outrageous. You cannot simply overturn a legal sale." Judge Harrington banged his gavel. "Order. I will have order in this court." When the noise died down, he continued, "However, in recognition of Mr. Blackthorn's good faith purchase and his investments in the property, I am ordering that Miss Grace compensate him for the purchase price he paid to the bank, plus a reasonable amount for improvements he has made. The exact amount will be determined by an independent assessor. Miss Grace will have 1 year to make this payment, at which point full ownership will transfer to her. If she fails to make the payment, the property will remain with Mr. Blackthorn. That is my ruling." Adelaide felt dizzy. She had won, but the victory came with a steep price. How was she supposed to come up with enough money to pay Blackthorn back in just 1 year? As the courtroom slowly emptied, Blackthorn approached their table, his lawyer beside him. "You have won a hollow victory, Miss Grace," he said coldly. "You will never be able to raise the money to pay me back. That land will be mine in the end, just as it is now." Before Adelaide could respond, Riley stepped forward. She is not alone, Blackthorn. She has people who believe in her and will help her. You might want to remember that. Blackthorn looked Riley up and down with contempt. A stable hand and his Indian bride. How touching. Enjoy your Pyrrhic victory while it lasts. He turned and left, his lawyer hurrying after him. Daniel Coburn began packing up his papers. Congratulations, Miss Grace. This was not the complete victory we hoped for, but it is significant nonetheless. Once the assessor determines the amount you owe, we can start figuring out how to raise the funds. Adelaide thanked him, but her mind was already racing. She had the small amount of silver Singing Bird had given her, but it would not be nearly enough. She would need to find work, save every penny, and hope that a year would be sufficient. Over the next few weeks, Adelaide threw herself into planning how to raise the money. Riley helped her convert the old mill building into a functioning operation again, and together they began taking on small lumber orders. Adelaide also discovered that there was a market for the beadwork and leather crafts she had learned to make with the Pomo. She worked late into the night creating items to sell, her fingers flying over the beads and thread as Riley read to her from books borrowed from the town's small library. The assessor determined that Adelaide owed Blackthorn $4,000, a sum that seemed impossibly large. But Adelaide refused to give up. She and Riley pooled their resources, and slowly, painfully, the amount in their savings began to grow. In December, Riley took Adelaide to see the small parcel of land he owned on the outskirts of town. It was beautiful country with rolling hills and a creek running through it. "I have been saving for years to buy this," he told her. "I was planning to build a house here eventually, maybe start a small ranch, but if we need to sell it to help pay Blackthorn, I will do it." Adelaide was moved by the offer, but she shook her head. "No, Riley, that is your dream. We will find another way." "You are my dream now," Riley said simply. "The land is just land. But you, Adelaide, you are my future. If selling this helps us get your family's property back, then it is worth it." In the end, they did not have to sell Riley's land. The turning point came in February when a businessman from San Francisco visited Willits looking for lumber suppliers. He heard about Adelaide's mill and came to inspect it. Impressed by the quality of the timber in the area and Adelaide's knowledge of the business, he placed a large order that provided a significant influx of cash. Other orders followed. Word spread that the old Grace mill was operating again, and customers who had done business with Adelaide's father decades ago returned, curious to see if the daughter could live up to the father's reputation. Adelaide proved that she could, combining her father's business acumen with the work ethic and resourcefulness she had learned with the Pomo. By May, just a few weeks before the anniversary of Adelaide's return to Willits, they had raised enough money to pay Blackthorn. The transaction took place in Judge Harrington's chambers, with Daniel Coburn overseeing the paperwork. Blackthorn accepted the payment with ill grace, counting the money twice, before grudgingly signing the deed over to Adelaide. "You have made a powerful enemy, Miss Grace," he said as he prepared to leave. "I do not forget slights, and I do not forgive them. You would be wise to watch your back. If you threaten her again, you will have to deal with me," Riley said quietly. "And I promise you, Blackthorn, that would not go well for you." For a moment, the two men stared at each other, tension crackling in the air. Then Blackthorn turned on his heel and left without another word. Adelaide stood holding the deed to her family's property, tears streaming down her face. "It is really mine," she whispered. "After everything, it is really mine." Riley wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "It is really yours, and I am so proud of you, Adelaide. You fought for this and earned it through your own hard work and determination." That evening, Riley took Adelaide back to the property that was now officially hers. They stood in front of the old mill as the sun set, casting everything in golden light. Riley reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I have been carrying this around for 2 months, waiting for the right moment," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold ring. "Adelaide Grace, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I want to build a life with you on this land, raise a family, and grow old together watching the sun set over these hills." Adelaide felt her heart overflow with love for this man who had stood by her through everything. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Riley, I will marry you. There is nothing I want more." They were married in June, a year after Adelaide had returned to Willits. The wedding was held at the church where Adelaide had been baptized as an infant, with Reverend Morrison officiating. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Whitmore helped Adelaide sew a simple white dress, and Sarah from the dress shop created a beautiful lace veil as a gift. Riley wore his best suit, though he admitted to Adelaide that he felt more comfortable in his work clothes. The reception was held at the mill, which Adelaide and Riley had spent weeks cleaning and decorating. They had invited everyone in town, a gesture of openness and forgiveness that surprised many people. Some of those who had been hostile to Adelaide came to the wedding and offered awkward apologies for how they had treated her. Adelaide accepted them graciously, choosing to focus on building bridges rather than holding grudges. Singing Bird and several other members of the Pomo tribe made the journey to attend the wedding, bringing gifts and blessings. Adelaide introduced Riley to them, and he greeted them with respect and genuine interest in their culture. Singing Bird pulled Adelaide aside at one point during the celebration. "You have found your place," Singing Bird said, touching Adelaide's face with weathered fingers. "You are a bridge between two worlds, daughter of my heart. You honor both your birth family and your Pomo family by making a life that embraces all you have been and all you can become. I could not have done any of this without the strength you taught me," Adelaide said, hugging the woman who had raised her. "Thank you for giving me a home when I had lost everything. Thank you for loving me and preparing me for this journey. You were always meant to find your way back," Singing Bird said. "The spirits knew it, even when you did not, and now you have found not just your land but your heart. This man Riley, he is good. He sees you truly, and that is the most precious gift anyone can give." Adelaide and Riley spent their wedding night in the small cabin they had built on the property, a new structure that honored the past while looking toward the future. It was simple but comfortable, with a fireplace that Riley had constructed himself and furniture they had made together during the long winter evenings. In the years that followed, Adelaide and Riley built a thriving business around the mill. They hired workers from town, providing good wages and fair treatment that earned them loyalty and respect. Adelaide's reputation as a skilled businesswoman grew, and the Grace Mill became known throughout Northern California for quality lumber. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Adelaide's father, was born in the spring of 1880. Adelaide went into labor on a sunny April morning, with Mrs. Henderson and Sarah attending as midwives. Riley paced outside the cabin, his worry evident despite Mrs. Henderson's assurances that everything was proceeding normally. When Mrs. Henderson finally emerged to tell him he had a son, Riley rushed inside to find Adelaide exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket Singing Bird had made. "He is perfect," Adelaide said, smiling up at her husband. "He has your eyes." Riley sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son with wonder. "Thomas Edwards," he said softly, "welcome to the world, little man. You have got quite a mother, and I promise to spend every day of my life trying to be the father you deserve." As Thomas grew, Adelaide taught him about both sides of his heritage. She told him stories of the Pomo people who had saved his mother's life, teaching him respect for the land and the importance of living in harmony with nature. She also told him about his grandfather, Thomas Grace, a hard-working man who had built something lasting with his own hands. Riley taught his son about horses and ranching, about being honest in business dealings, and about standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. In 1882, Adelaide gave birth to twin daughters, Rebecca and Rose. The girls were born during a rare California snowstorm, and Riley joked that they had dramatic timing. The twins were as different as could be, Rebecca serious and thoughtful while Rose was adventurous and bold. Adelaide saw pieces of herself in both of them and hoped they would grow up knowing they could be anything they chose to be. The mill continued to prosper, and Adelaide and Riley were able to expand their operations. They bought additional land, including, ironically, a parcel that Blackthorne had been forced to sell after some of his business ventures failed. The former rancher left Willits in disgrace after being caught cheating at cards, and while Adelaide took no pleasure in his downfall, she could not help but feel a sense of justice in how things had worked out. By 1885, Adelaide and Riley had become pillars of the Willits community. They donated money to build a new school and supported the church. Adelaide served on the town council and advocated for better relations between the town and the local Native American communities. Her unique perspective as someone who had lived in both worlds gave her insights that helped bridge cultural divides. Riley never sought the spotlight, content to work hard and support his wife in all her endeavors. But the townspeople recognized his quiet strength and the crucial role he had played in helping Adelaide establish herself. He was widely respected as a fair and honest man, someone whose word could be trusted absolutely. As their children grew, Adelaide often took them to visit Singing Bird and the Pomo settlement. The kids loved these trips, learning skills and hearing stories that connected them to their mother's past. Thomas became particularly skilled at tracking and hunting, while Rebecca showed a talent for beadwork that delighted Singing Bird. Rose loved the stories of warriors and adventures, always begging to hear more. In 1888, Adelaide gave birth to their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Mary after Adelaide's mother. The birth was difficult, and afterward the doctor warned that Adelaide should not have any more children. Riley, terrified at how close he had come to losing his wife, readily agreed. Mary was a miracle, a beautiful baby with dark hair and her mother's determined spirit. As the 1880s drew to a close, Adelaide sometimes sat on the porch of their home and marveled at the life she had built. The mill hummed with activity during the day. Her children played in the yard, their laughter echoing across the property. Riley worked nearby, always within sight, still the steady and loving presence he had been from that first day in town. "You ever regret it?" Riley asked one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. The children were in bed and they had these quiet moments to themselves. "Coming back here, I mean. It was so hard at first and people treated you so poorly." Adelaide leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. "No," she said firmly, "I do not regret it. If I had not come back, I would never have found you. I would never have reclaimed my family's legacy. I would never have learned that I could belong in both worlds, that I did not have to choose between the life the Pomo gave me and the life I was born into. Everything I went through, all the difficulty and struggle, it led me to this moment, to this life with you and our children. How could I regret that?" Riley kissed the top of her head. "I thank God every day that you walked into Willits when you did. You changed my life, Adelaide." You made me braver and better. You taught me that love means standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, and you gave me a family I cherish more than anything in this world. We built this together, Adelaide reminded him. Every step of the way, we faced it together. That is what made the difference. In 1890, Thomas turned 10 and began taking a more active role in the mill operations. He showed a natural aptitude for the business, and Adelaide taught him everything her father had taught her about lumber, about treating workers fairly, about building something that would last. Riley taught him about managing the ranch operations they had expanded into, about caring for animals and land stewardship. The twins were 8 and already showing strong personalities. Rebecca loved books and learning, spending hours in the small library Adelaide had assembled in their home. Rose preferred to be outside, helping her father with the horses or exploring the hills with the energy of a young colt. They were both fiercely protective of their baby sister Mary, who at 2 years old had the entire family wrapped around her tiny finger. Adelaide maintained close ties with the Pomo community throughout these years. When conflicts arose between white settlers and Native Americans, she often served as a mediator, using her unique position to help both sides understand each other. It was not always successful, and there were times when the prejudices ran too deep to bridge. But Adelaide never stopped trying, believing that understanding and respect were possible if people were willing to make the effort. Singing Bird lived until 1892, passing peacefully in her sleep at an age no one knew precisely, but everyone agreed was very old. Adelaide grieved deeply for the woman who had been more than a mother to her, who had given her life meaning and purpose when she had lost everything. At Singing Bird's funeral, attended by both Pomo tribe members and many residents of Willits, Adelaide spoke about the bridges Singing Bird had helped build and the legacy of kindness she left behind. She taught me that family is not just about blood, Adelaide said, her voice strong despite the tears on her face. It is about who claims you, who raises you, who loves you without condition. She gave me that gift, and I have tried to honor it by passing it on to my own children and to this community. We are all connected, all part of the same human family. That is what Singing Bird believed, and that is what I will continue to believe and teach for the rest of my life. Riley stood beside her, holding Mary in his arms while Thomas and the twins stood close by. They were a family that reflected the blending of worlds, the possibility of unity despite differences, and they were proof that love could transcend boundaries of culture and history. As the years continued to pass, Adelaide and Riley watched their children grow into remarkable young people. Thomas became a skilled businessman and rancher, taking on more and more responsibility at the mill. At 18, he announced his intention to attend college in San Francisco to study business and engineering, wanting to bring new ideas and methods back to the family business. Adelaide and Riley were proud, even though they would miss him terribly. The twins developed into young women of substance and character. Rebecca became a teacher, opening a small school on the property where she taught not just reading and writing, but also lessons about different cultures and the importance of understanding. Rose pursued her passion for horses, developing a breeding program that became renowned throughout California. Both girls attracted suitors, but they were in no hurry to marry, having been raised to value their independence and capabilities. Mary, growing up in a household where she was cherished but not coddled, became a spirited and confident child. She absorbed lessons from her siblings and parents, learning business skills from Thomas, teaching methods from Rebecca, horsemanship from Rose, and from her parents the importance of integrity, hard work, and compassion. In 1895, When Adelaide was 40 years old and Riley was 42, they celebrated their 20th anniversary. Thomas came home from college for the occasion, and the whole family gathered for a celebration that included many friends from both Willits and the Pomo community. It was a testament to how much had changed in 2 decades, how Adelaide had gone from an outsider facing hostility to a respected member of the community whose influence had helped transform the town into a more accepting place. During the celebration, Adelaide stood to make a toast. 20 years ago, I returned to Willits with nothing but a small pack and determination to reclaim what was mine. I expected to face my past alone. But then, a cowboy with kind eyes and a good heart decided to treat me like I belonged, and everything changed. Riley Edwards, you have been my partner, my protector, my love, and my best friend. You stood by me when no one else would. You fought for me, believed in me, and helped me build a life beyond anything I could have imagined. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me, and loving what you saw. Riley pulled her into his arms, kissing her in front of everyone to cheers and applause. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Adelaide Grace Edwards, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. As the party continued around them, Adelaide looked at the life she had built and felt complete. She had reclaimed her family's legacy, built a successful business, raised 4 incredible children, and found a love that sustained her through every challenge. She had made peace with her past and embraced a future that honored all the parts of who she was. The mill continued to thrive into the new century. Thomas returned from college with innovative ideas that modernized operations while maintaining the commitment to quality that had been the foundation of the Grace name. He married a woman named Elizabeth, whom he had met at college, a smart and capable woman who fit seamlessly into the family. They gave Adelaide and Riley their first grandchildren, twin boys born in 1898. Rebecca married a fellow teacher in 1900, a gentle man named David who shared her passion for education. They opened a larger school in Willits that welcomed children of all backgrounds, continuing Adelaide's work of building bridges between cultures. Rose surprised everyone by marrying a Pomo man named Running Deer, whom she had known since childhood. Their wedding blended traditions from both cultures in a beautiful ceremony that moved everyone who attended. Mary, the baby of the family, grew into a young woman as fierce and determined as her mother. She attended college back east, one of the few women in her class, and returned with a degree in law. She announced her intention to practice law in California, focusing on protecting the rights of Native Americans who were still facing discrimination and land theft. Adelaide could not have been prouder. As Riley and Adelaide grew older, they gradually handed more responsibilities to their children while still remaining active in the business and the community. They took pleasure in their grandchildren, watching the next generation grow up with opportunities and acceptance that had been hard-won. The Grace Mill remained a family business, one that provided employment and opportunity for dozens of families in the region. In 1905, Adelaide turned 50. It was hard to believe how much time had passed, how much had changed. She still kept in touch with the Pomo community, still made regular visits, and maintained the connections that had been so important to her. Her children and grandchildren knew and honored both sides of their heritage, comfortable moving between worlds in a way that would have been impossible when Adelaide first returned to Willits. One warm summer evening, Adelaide and Riley sat on the porch of their home, exactly where they had sat so many times over the years. Their hair was graying now, their faces lined with the marks of time and laughter. but Riley's eyes still lit up when he looked at Adelaide, and her heart still skipped a beat when he smiled at her. "You remember that first day?" Riley asked. "When you stood in the middle of Main Street and everyone was staring at you?" Adelaide laughed. "How could I forget? I was terrified, even though I tried not to show it. And then you walked over and treated me like a human being instead of a curiosity or a threat. That changed everything. I knew from the moment I saw you that you were someone special," Riley said. "There was something in the way you held yourself, the determination in your eyes. I thought, now here is a woman worth knowing, and I was right." "We have built a good life," Adelaide said, taking his hand. "A life I could not have imagined when I was 8 years old and running through the woods in terror. Or when I was growing up with the Pomo, learning to live in a completely different world. All the pain, all the struggle, it led me to you. To this. To our children and grandchildren. To a legacy that will outlast us both." Riley lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Adelaide Grace Edwards. I have loved you for more than a quarter century, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Riley Edwards. You were my hero when I needed one most. You became my partner, my equal, my love. You gave me back my faith in people, in the possibility of belonging. You gave me a home, not just in this place but in your heart, and that has made all the difference." They sat together as the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, the sounds of life and joy and continuity. The mill stood silent for the night, but it would hum with activity again tomorrow, a testament to perseverance and the power of reclaiming what had been lost. Adelaide thought about that frightened 8-year-old girl running through the woods, and the strong woman she had become through the love and teaching of the Pomo people. She thought about the 23-year-old woman who had returned to Willits with nothing but determination and hope, facing hostility and prejudice, but refusing to back down. And she looked at the life she had now, surrounded by family and respect and love, and knew that every moment of struggle had been worth it. The Grace Mill would continue to operate for generations, always run by Adelaide and Riley's descendants, always maintaining the principles of fairness and quality that had been its foundation. The family became known throughout California, not just for their business success, but for their commitment to bridging cultural divides and treating all people with dignity. Adelaide lived to the remarkable age of 78, passing peacefully in 1933 with Riley holding her hand, and their children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. Riley followed her just 6 months later, unable to face a world without his beloved wife. They were buried side by side on the property they had fought so hard to reclaim, under an oak tree that had stood sentinel over the land for hundreds of years. Their great-grandchildren still tell the story of Adelaide Grace, who returned to Willits after 15 years with the Pomo tribe, and found love and acceptance from one cowboy who treated her like she belonged. It became a family legend, a tale of courage and perseverance and the transformative power of love. And it served as a reminder that sometimes the most important thing we can do is see another person truly, accept them completely, and stand beside them when the world tells them they do not belong. The Grace Mill still stands today, a historic landmark and a thriving business. On a plaque near the entrance, there is an inscription that Adelaide herself wrote in the last years of her life. Built on determination, sustained by hard work, blessed by love. This mill represents the joining of two worlds, two cultures, two hearts. May it always stand as a testament to what we can achieve when we choose understanding over prejudice, love over fear, and connection over division. And so the story of Adelaide Grace and Riley Edwards became woven into the history of Willits, California. A reminder that the Wild West was not just a place of violence and conflict, but also of incredible love stories, of people who defied expectations and built lives of meaning and purpose. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the business they built, and in the countless lives they touched by choosing to see the humanity in everyone they met. The sun that set over the California hills on that evening when Adelaide and Riley reflected on their life together continues to set and rise, marking the passage of time and the enduring nature of love. Their story, like the land they fought for and the mill they rebuilt, stands as proof that coming home is not always about returning to a place, but about finding where you belong. And for Adelaide, she belonged with Riley, in Willits, living a life that honored every part of who she was and every person who had shaped her journey. Their love story became the stuff of legend, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires for generations. It was a love that transcended cultural boundaries, that survived hostility and hardship, that grew stronger with each passing year. It was the kind of love that changes not just two lives but an entire community, that ripples outward in ways that can never be fully measured. When the sun rises over Willits today, it shines on a town that is richer for having been home to Adelaide and Riley. The Grace Mill still operates, now run by the fifth generation of their family. The land they fought so hard for continues to be productive and beautiful. And the spirit of acceptance and understanding they work to foster remains a part of the community's character. This is the story of how one woman's courage and one man's kindness created something extraordinary. How a girl who lost everything found it all again. How a cowboy who saw a stranger in need became a husband, father, and pillar of his community. How love, real and true and lasting, can flourish even in the harsh environment of the Old West, proving that the human heart is capable of incredible things when given the chance. Adelaide Grace and Riley Edwards lived there happily ever after, not in some fairy tale kingdom, but in the real world, with its challenges and struggles and imperfections. They built their happiness through daily choices, through standing by each other, through facing difficulties together and celebrating victories as a team. Their ending was not neat or simple but rich and complex and deeply satisfying, a life well lived and a love well loved. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson their story teaches. That happily ever after is not a destination but a journey, not something you find but something you build, brick by brick, day by day, with the person who treats you like you belong even when the rest of the world says you do not. For Adelaide, that person was Riley Edwards, and their love story remains one of the greatest to ever unfold in the Wild West of California in the late 19th century.